Tennessee can still host a playoff game. And I'll gladly explain how. But would you like to first tell me that I'm absolutely crazy?
Dave, you are absolutely crazy. But go ahead.
That's crazy.
All right. I rarely drop the crazy on myself, but everybody agrees with you, so maybe I am insane. I've been called worse. Okay, so here's my argument. So let's say number 2 Texas beats the pants off Georgia. I mean, destroys them. Let's say it's 50-3. Do I think that's going to happen? No. But it could. Now, let's say number 1 Oregon in the Big Ten championship game hammers number 3 Penn State. Then Penn State could drop behind the Vols. One of those teams could drop behind the Vols. And I say this with Tennessee at number 7 because I think the committee would like to shake things up one more time because it gets us all watching. Don't start booking your hotel in Columbus quite yet, is what I would tell you. I would wait until Sunday because it wouldn't surprise me if the college football playoff wants to, the committee wants to shake things up a little bit. And I will go off previous years. Now, I think you would agree with me on this. There is no doubt that if one of those two things happened, which is Penn State getting shellacked or Georgia getting hammered, there is no question in my mind that in the AP and coaches poll, they would drop beyond Tennessee at number 7. Or even if they just dropped beyond Ohio State at number 6, that would still rearrange the bracket. That wouldn't necessarily mean Tennessee would host. But, Caleb, it is possible.
And here's why you're wrong. The committee has said very clearly, plenty of times, they won't punish teams for losing a conference title game beyond what they would punish them for as if they didn't play in the conference title game. So when you win a conference title game, you get the reward of winning it. But if you lose a conference title game, they will treat it as if you never played in it, which, by the way, they should do. That's how they should approach it. You shouldn't get punished because you had to play that extra game. With that in mind, if Georgia loses 50-3 to Texas, as you say is possible,
Can I throw this at you? What if Georgia pulls a Columbia collapse like Tennessee did in 2022? And I don't wish anyone to get injured, okay? But what if Carson Beck were to get injured, their star player? What if Texas just ran up and down the field on them? You're saying no way, no how.
No way, no how. No way, no how. And unless Carson Beck gets hurt, at which point I don't know what the committee will do then, because they do factor that. They do factor, like, they have to factor in health into account. That's the possibility. But let's assume for a minute that there aren't injuries like that. And I still don't know if Georgia wouldn't get the home game.
And to be clear, what I'm arguing, I don't think is fair nor right. I think if you play in it, what you said is exactly right. You shouldn't be punished for losing. You can be rewarded for winning. I agree with you, but I'm just saying I don't trust this committee. It sounds like to me that you've completely fallen in love with this committee and you trust them 100%.
I mean, I think they got it perfectly right this time. I do. I think they got it perfectly right. The exact top 12 is exactly where it should be. My only gripe is Miami at number 12 should not be ahead of Ole Miss and South Carolina at 13 or 14. Miami should be down at 14, and Ole Miss and South Carolina should be ahead of Miami. But outside of that, they nailed it. Okay. And truth be told, if Georgia loses 50-3, Georgia's 10-3, but it would be treated as if they were 10-2, just like Tennessee. They will have beaten Tennessee by 2 touchdowns. Also, Dave, even if they lose 100-0 to Texas, there's still the fact that they beat Texas earlier in the year on the road. So then they get to come around and claim, hey guys, we beat the SEC champions in their house. Okay. So they still have that quality win. Now going to Penn State, if Penn State loses 75-0, Penn State then has the same number of losses as Tennessee and one more win at 11 wins. There's no way that Penn State and Georgia are dropping below Tennessee. And by the way, I'm going to point this out, last point. You don't want that because, Dave, if Georgia drops below Tennessee and falls to the 8 seed specifically, if Georgia loses like that and they did bump Tennessee would play Georgia in the first round, and I don't think Tennessee wants any part of Georgia in the first round. I'm just going to say that.
Well, and I'll say this as well. They wouldn't want a rematch of 2 SEC teams. So that's when I think politics would come into play. But I say bank on it. Tennessee could still potentially host a college football playoff game. I'm not ruling anything out with this committee. Caleb says bank on it. Dave's gone crazy.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank.
Caleb, doesn't this come back to your point that the conference championship games are nearly irrelevant? I mean, if what you're saying is right, and you may well be right, doesn't it mean that these are just basically neutral site bowl games, which they were neutral sites as well, but these are basically just bowl games? I mean, what's the difference between Tennessee, Syracuse next year in Atlanta as opposed to Texas, Georgia in Atlanta this year, if what you're saying is true?
Yeah, there's hardly any difference. And here's the other point. This is a big one.
I was hoping you'd argue that it still matters to get an
No,
SEC
because
championship.
let's also point this out, Dave. If what you say is true, if what you say happens, and Georgia gets bumped out of a home playoff game because they lost to Texas, you're going to see teams purposely throw, and I don't mean like not trying to win regular season games. No, you're going to see teams throw regular season games on purpose next year because they want to avoid playing in the conference title game when that could result in, because they could get punished for losing it. Dave, you're setting up a really, really bad situation. We're going to talk about this tomorrow. We don't have time to talk about that today, but they got to change the seeding rules of the college football playoff. There's no reason there should be. I don't mind auto bids getting in, but giving them top 4 seeds is absolutely stupid and ridiculous, and it just ruins everything about the sport. But different topic for another day. But just to give you
that's a really good point. I didn't have as much of a problem with auto bids in general, but them being 1 through 4 is kind of
it's dumb. And I'll give you an example of how this happened. So I'm a big Grizzly fan. So back in the mid 2000s, the Grizzlies and the Clippers, the way the NBA used to see the playoffs was the 3 division champions would get the top 3 seeds, and then everybody else seeded as follows. But the team with the better record, no matter what the seed, gets the home court advantage. So, Dave, I kid you not, the Nuggets were winning their division, but that was a much worse division than everybody else. But the Nuggets were going to get the 3 seed. The Mavericks were the second best team in the West, but they were going to be locked into the 4 seed because the Spurs were the best team in that division. The Grizzlies and the Clippers were vying for this 5th and the 6th spot. The Clippers wanted the 6th spot because if you got the 6th seed, you got to play at home against the Nuggets versus the 5th seed playing on the road against the Mavericks. The Clippers just straight up purposely tanked the last 10 games of the regular season. They just threw them. And it was so obvious they threw them. You're incentivizing people to throw the regular season games if you count conference championship games against them. That's what you're doing.
Give us an update on the poll question before we change it up, because I got another direction that I want to go with that. And I want to let you know that portions of the program are brought to you by our friends at the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com, Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOKED. That's HOOKED for 10% off. Also want to thank our friends at Hound Dogs of Knoxville. Champions look good in orange. HDKnoxville.com, HDKnoxville.com. So, Caleb, poll question before we change this thing up.
All right, so the poll question says, what are Tennessee's chances of winning at Ohio State? Impossible, 3%, slight chance, 14%, realistic chance, but less than 50%, 36%, greater than 50%, 47%. So a plurality believes that Tennessee is likely to win at Ohio State.
Okay. I want you to change it to something along the lines of, I'm still holding out hope for a home college football playoff game. And I'm curious if our listeners who I've said this before, we have the smartest fan base. I read the comments. I don't get to all of them, but I read the comments, and we have the smartest fan base of any media outlet out there. End of discussion. It's not even close. Some of you say some crazy things. Agreed. But most of you are pretty on point. So have you given up complete hope? I would ask that question in some shape, form, or fashion on the poll question. So you are 100% saying there is no way Tennessee. If I even said 1%, you wouldn't even go that direction.
No, not even 1%. Not even 1%.
Okay. All right. A couple of things. Adam says they fixed the rankings for Ohio State. What would keep them from fixing the officiating?
They didn't fix the rankings for Ohio State, guys. Like, and someone just said bring back the BCS. If you had the BCS formula, Ohio State would be ahead of Tennessee. If you have the net rankings in college basketball, Ohio State would be ahead of Tennessee. If you had the RPI, Ohio State would be ahead of Tennessee. You guys want formulas. If you had a formula and not a selection committee, in
Go ahead.
In every single formula ever devised to rank teams, Ohio State would be ahead of Tennessee in those formulas.
Okay, two different takes completely. Matt says things will change by the next ranking. They're not just going to stay chalk. They can't. You've got teams playing. And Adam says, Dave, you're warden of the nut house. So somewhere in between lies the truth. You don't believe that things will change at all in the rankings coming up?
I think they will, but not enough to move Tennessee up. No, the top 1 through 6 are staying ahead of Tennessee. That's just, I'm sorry, but 1 through 6 are staying ahead of Tennessee no matter what. Notre Dame and Ohio State aren't playing. Penn State and Georgia. Look, I think the only thing that would change is if Georgia beats Texas, you move Georgia up and drop Texas. But again, none of these teams are going to drop below Tennessee. They're not going to punish you. First of all, the SEC is heavily involved in putting these things together, and they want their conference titles to matter. Do you realize what it would do to the SEC title game? The damage has already been done. Dave, how much more damage would be done if you get punished for losing the SEC title game? Do you realize what that would do?
Punished.
Not beyond teams that didn't go to the title game. Otherwise, you're incentivizing not going to the title game.
Okay.
Why go to the title game if losing can hurt you?
Okay, if that's the case, then why was Alabama ahead of Tennessee in 2022? Now, I do know this is a different set of people. The committee rolls over, every 2 years or however often it is. I do realize it's a different set of people. To my knowledge, Condoleezza Rice is not on this one. But, Caleb, if that's the case, then why was Alabama ahead of Tennessee?
Well, wait, neither of those teams played for the SEC title in 2022, though. That's irrelevant.
But why couldn't you potentially drop Georgia despite the head-to-head? That's my point. Sorry, I was convoluted.
Because you would drop them based on how the title game went. And you can't punish people based on the title game. Because if you drop Georgia below Tennessee, what you're saying is Georgia, for having earned a spot in the SEC title game, is now at risk of falling below a team that didn't make the SEC title game because Georgia earned that spot. You just can't do that. And I mean, you can't, Dave, if you do that, you will see teams throw games on purpose next year. You will see teams straight up forfeit games. Okay.
Well,
and
didn't Lane Kiffin kind of hint at that? He didn't say throw games, but he said there's incentive not to play in that game.
Yes. And you will solidify that incentive. If you do what you're saying, you will solidify it. Why would anybody try to go play in that game at that point? Okay, so what you're talking about, you were talking about a very, very dangerous situation. I talked for a while about conference title games not mattering, not really wanting to go, resting your starters, whatever. What you're talking about, though, if they do that, it won't just be resting your starters, conference title games not mattering. What you're talking about is purposely losing a game. I mean, I don't mean like not trying to win like I talked about earlier in the week.
Actually literally going out and taking a knee on the first snap.
Not taking a knee, handing the ball to the other team and say, go run that in for a touchdown. I mean, forfeiting, making sure you get a loss on your schedule.
It's like Bobby Boucher. Peak IV hydration in South Knoxville and Sevierville. Live your life to the fullest. Hydrate, rejuvenate, and elevate your health with Peak IV hydration. That's peakivhydration.com. But Caleb, here's my problem with where you are on this. And that is a football game still should matter immensely in the rankings. I think you would agree with me that if Georgia got shellacked, and I don't know that this is going to happen, so I can never be proven right or wrong. But in the coaches and AP poll, I think you would agree that Georgia could potentially fall past Tennessee if it were a one-sided game. Would you? Or do you disagree with that as well?
No, in the AP poll,
What did I say?
Well, yeah, if you say AP poll, then yes, but not in the college football playoff. No, there's nothing that can happen.
No, I said coach. Yeah, coaches and AP poll.
Yes, Georgia could fall past Tennessee in the coaches and AP poll, but Ohio State's behind Tennessee in the coaches and AP poll too. But they're not going to fall past Tennessee in the college football playoff rankings. That's the philosophy. And I'm just going to tell you guys this straight up. I get what you're saying. Games have to matter. They do matter. Theoretically, I don't think they do because I don't care about the bye. But if you care about the bye, you're playing these conference title games to get a bye. So the winner is getting rewarded, but you can't punish the loser beyond teams that wouldn't otherwise go. I mean, this is just, I'm sorry. That's just how it goes. And yeah, I think, I know I'm in the minority among our community, but the committee got it right. And Tennessee has no chance of hosting a playoff game. It's over. It's over. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get excited. Get it. Love the chance to go to Columbus and win. Dave, if you go to Columbus and win, you're the story of college football.
Yeah. And I will say this too. This is, and this kind of goes back to the whining topic, but I want to address it really quickly. You have to remember that there's two things that happen by you being one. Let's say that Ohio State, Tennessee holds in Columbus. Okay. You have to remember that this helps in two ways. Now, I could always say recruiting because what did I cover for a lot of years, Caleb?
Covered recruiting.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can always say, oh, it helps in recruiting. And it does. I mean, not just a one game thing, but the entire coverage that you get, you cannot buy in recruiting. Speaking of buy, those NIL boosters that paid the cash money for this, listen, as an investment, you should be happy with it no matter what happens in Columbus, because Tennessee is back to the point of being a national championship contender. So those boosters, those NIL boosters specifically, I'm not talking about new facilities, but those NIL boosters are going to say, I'll spend every bit that I spent and more, especially if the economy gets a little bit better.
Totally agree. I'll also add this. Here's one thing that may change, Dave. And you want me to tell you where this may change and where you could actually end up being right?
Actually end up being right. Like, you'd be stunned if I were right.
Yes, because there's one giant gaping flaw in the system. And this is why I wanted to talk about seeding, but we'll do it tomorrow. Penn State right now is locked in at the number 5 seed. Okay. They, as the number 5 seed, with the way the playoff is set up right now, in the first round, they would play Arizona State at home. And then in the second round, they would play Boise State. Whereas Oregon, as the number 1 seed, would get a bye and then play the winner of Tennessee, Ohio State in the second round. You want Penn State's road over Oregon's road. So here's what's going to happen. They have accidentally incentivized you to lose the Big Ten title game. And because the Big Ten loser is going to get the 5 seed and the Big Ten winner is going to get the 1 seed. The 5 seed's better than the 1 seed. Where you might be right, Dave, is they might say, rather than just fix this because the seeding is stupid, they might come around and say, well, let's punish teams for losing conference title games now. So they have to try to win. Because right now, because they screwed this up so badly, again, I'm not blaming the committee. I'm blaming how they set up the college football playoff format to begin with. That is the original sin in this, guys. Not the committee. The committee's just doing the rankings based on what the format is. You may know this. I don't think the committee set up the format, right, Dave? That was the conference commissioners and the athletic directors.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows nowadays because there's no NCAA really running things. But
yes,
essentially, I'll tell you who set it up. It was Greg Sankey and it was the Big Ten commissioner,
Tony Petitti. Yeah. So if you see Oregon and Penn State, one of those teams is going to try to lose this weekend. I'm dead serious. I think one of them is going to try to lose. And if that happens, if I'm Oregon, I'm resting every starter. I'm not even playing this weekend. That will show up the Big Ten title Tony Petitti's going to look like an idiot. And rather than fix this situation with the way the playoff is right now, they'll just come around next year and be like, well, now you can be punished for losing a conference title game.
Thank you, Steve. Steve says, so Georgia can play scrubs and lose on purpose and not get punished.
Yes. That's what they said.
Then I want a refund on my ticket if I go to that game. Or, I mean, I get a
Dave, what did yeah, fine. Get your refund. What have I warned you? Dave, what have I warned you about the entire year? What have I said would happen? I told you guys this. I said the whole time this format is stupid. It's a dumb format. Your argument is not against the committee. There's no unfair treatment against the SEC. Your argument is against a stupid, dumb format that makes this whole scenario laughable. The college football playoff is laughable. They've embarrassed themselves. And it's funny because the Big Ten and the SEC commissioners, like you said, set this up. They rendered their own conference title games pointless. It's their fault. They aren't that bright.
All right. Chad says, well, Caleb has been wrong before. I think Tennessee's home game sells better than a bleepy Ohio State home game.
Well, they're not going to flip Tennessee and Ohio State in home games. Ohio State's already ahead of Tennessee.
Right. I think you would have to see some sort of mass chaos. I don't think that they're just going to flip those two teams.
And those things, guys, they sell equally. Like the difference is like meaningless between Ohio State and Tennessee in terms of a home game.
Okay? Well, we talk about they don't want Ryan Day back, but they're not going to say, "Oh, I'm not going to a championship or a playoff game right down the road because I don't like Ryan." I mean, if you already. I mean, trust me, the students are going to show up. The boosters are going to, the season ticket holders are going to show up. You're not, and that's a very fervent fan base. So they're going to put it behind them and say, hey, let's go win a national championship. Now, it's what's funny if Ryan Day and the Buckeyes lose to Tennessee, then you could see a change. But you're not going to see any sort of picketing line on the outside, fire Ryan Day right before a playoff game. That would just be absolutely silly.